The alpha of the pack I was currently residing in, Alpha Thompson, found Lyra being beaten by her pack members during one of the social events held at their territory. Abuse was something he didn't tolerate, child abuse more so. He demanded the right to claim her, and unsurprisingly, the Redusk pack was more than willing to give Lyra up with nothing in exchange. They saw her as baggage left behind. She was only 3 years old when Alpha Thompson brought her here. Bentley told me how the first time he saw her, she was covered with bruises all over her tan skin. Cuts and scars littered her arms and legs, some old but most new and fresh. You could only imagine the kind of abuse she's been through at Redusk. Alpha Thompson was bringing her to the pack house. Her tiny body cradled in his big arms was a sight to see. It was even harder to imagine. Bentley was just walking home when he saw her. He couldn't believe how malnourished she was. She was only skin and bones, he'd tell me. Lyra had refused to lift her eyes from the ground when she was officially introduced as a new pack member. He guessed she was constantly told to avoid eye contact as a way to shame and humiliate the young child, to carve into her mind that she was below everyone else because of her bloodline, that she was born inferior. I could never understand how someone could lay their hands on children. Such young, pure souls, not knowing the ugliness of the world, being stripped from their innocence. The trauma of being abused since basically her birth took its toll on her and influenced her greatly. She was withdrawn, unusually quiet and overly wary. She didn't play with other pups her age and took to just staring at flowers. Apparently Redusk kept her indoors at all times. So when she finally caught a glimpse of the outside, she was taken to observing them. Thus, meeting Bentley, who she grew somewhat dependent on. It took a good full year for her to even crack a smile. A mistrustful Lyra denied anyone who tried to get close to her. Sometimes she still denied Bentley. Many of the pack members offered to adopt her, but Lyra refused to go along with anyone. She was satisfied staying in the pack house with other orphans who would soon be adopted. She often threw tantrums when someone tried to get close. He told me that she'd kick, scream, cry out, and attempt to run whenever someone tried to bring her home. I frowned at the words Bentley said to me once. The poor child has been through a lot. When she turned 5 a few months ago, she asked me if I loved her like she did from Redusk. I was so confused. I was under the impression Redusk treated her badly, but then again, maybe there was at least one person who actually cared for her. Maybe a relative of some sort, possibly a family friend. So I told her that I did, but then she just frowns and her lips begin to quiver and she goes, "You'll hurt me too?" The bastard proclaimed to love her every time she'd hit her. Every hit she laid on Lyra's skin pounded the wrong definition of love into her head. To Lyra, love meant physical, emotional, and mental pain. "Selly, can we see the flowers?" Lyra mumbled into my jeans. I blinked away the anger bubbling in my chest and laughed softly at her before nodding. Skimming my hand affectionately against her cheek, I felt my heart warm as she leaned in. As much as Lyra strayed away from affectionate touches, she was also desperate for them. A dangerous combination that could determine whether or not Lyra would lash out if used at the wrong moment. Being starved of affection can do that to you. My wolf had admittedly gotten maternal over the pup. Ever since the day we met her when she was playing in Bentley's garden when I first arrived, we had formed a cautious relationship. Through her, Bentley had met me and offered me a job. As the days I kept coming increased, she slowly opened up to me until she practically followed me around like a lost puppy. She was like a ray of sunshine in my life. Lyra was one of the biggest reasons I'm stable enough, aside from the overwhelming kindness the pack showed me and the garden Bentley let me work on. I was an emotional, depressed mess when I first arrived here. No point in sugarcoating it. I wasn't keeping track of time, bothering to go out to eat, and just lived through life like a shell of a person for almost 2 weeks. Missing my garden back home didn't help either. It was only until I found out that the pack territory had a large field did I gain some kind of interest or motivation to get up. I managed to keep my mind off things and focus on myself whenever I would work on the plants. It was the perfect distraction. Just staring at the calming beauty of nature was enough to lighten my mood and clear my thoughts for a moment. Bentley, Duskfall, and Lyra were my lifesavers. They pulled me from the darkest corner of my life. They gave me the true understanding of what family meant. From randomly being invited to dinners included in social events, asked to come over at houses, befriending almost everyone in the pack, and freely spending my time at the garden without being judged, Duskfall was my sanctuary. A pack free from the poisonous tentacles of dramatics. It hurt to know that someday I would leave it all behind, that my time here was ticking. This privilege of living life to the fullest was limited. It was all in the hands of Landon, the mate who didn't want me. Of course we can. I looked up to Bentley, who nodded at my silent question for approval. Giving him one last smile, I leaned down to carry Lyra against my chest before walking off to the flower garden. She locked her legs together, squeezing my waist between them as her arms hung around my neck. Lyra squirmed in my hold, her small hand clutching onto the back of my shirt as she buried her face in the crook of my neck. I felt a small laugh escape me when she peered over my shoulder to look at Bentley before quickly ducking down when he caught her stare. The little pup was quite the cutie. We walked down the trail for about 7 minutes of silence when she asked, "Selly, are you going to leave?" I flinched at the suddenness of her question. She never really asked about my stay until now. I stopped walking mid-step to look down at her before continuing our way to the flower garden. She kept her head down, the crown of her head the only thing I could see. She was playing with a lock of my hair, her fingers combing through the strands at the ends. Lyra knew I was only visiting for a while. Everyone in the pack knew that. They didn't know for what reason, though. Some would ask, but I brushed it off, saying it was some minor issue back home. I could only guess what kind of excuse Landon came up with. I highly doubt he would go on a limb to say that I was his rejected mate, and he needed me to stay away so he can mark and mate my sister. I wasn't eager to receive looks of pity from them either if I told them the truth. I had my fill of that from Bentley, the only one I ever told. He was angry for me, but most of all I could see the sympathy under those bluish-green eyes. His mate had passed on a few years back, but he was happy. He was content. He had the chance to love and cherish his mate till her very last breath. It was an honor, he said, an honor to have been the one to provide her with a lifetime full of love and affection. An honor to be her mate that she had blessed with a family of 3. Him, her, and their son, Isaac. Isaac was supposedly out of pack territory training to become the next Gamma at a training camp in the south. Gammas and Betas were chosen by the reigning Alpha. They weren't passed down from generation to generation like Alphas were. After choosing the candidate, they were sent to train for the position. It was only after the completion of their extensive training that they were given a ceremony to officially accept the title. There was a lot of requirements to pass the standards. Bentley keeps close contact with his son. He writes him letter that he would receive a response to every 2 weeks. I could see with the way his eyes glimmer with pride when he speaks of him that his son was his biggest joy. Being mateless and away from his son did make him feel quite lonely. So when Lyra came into the picture, he found a new sense of purpose. He would take care of her with the remaining years he had left in him. Bentley often said he misses his mate, Maria, dearly. Sometimes still seeing her sitting in her favorite couch with her legs propped up reading a romance novel. She may have aged, but she's still the romantic she always was when we first met at 16. The warmth in his eyes as he said that tugged at my heart, in both good and bad ways. It was only then did I realize I wouldn't have any of that. I wouldn't have anyone to just sit around and do nothing with, to just enjoy and revel in each other's company. No one to memorize their little habits and mannerisms. I tried not thinking about it too much, but it was hard not to when I could physically feel my bond with Landon weaken. Turns out what he said was true. The mate bond was slowly loosening, and I felt every layer forcibly removed by his increasing emotional bond to Hestia deep in my bones. Every time I felt it, a piece of me fell away. Suddenly, a sharp pain twisted in my gut. I hunched over, mouth open, in a soundless scream when I fell onto the ground. I managed to keep myself from falling face first because of the little girl still in my arms. She was the only thing racing through my mind. Lyla squealed, startled from my wheezing. She squirmed in my hold until I let go, but I couldn't breathe. My hands shakily clutched onto the fabric over my heart, my mind going hazy as my vision began to black out. I was suffocating. I forced as much air down my throat, but it wasn't enough. My hands had curled themselves around my neck. It was like every breath I took, I was swallowing acid. A burning sensation would travel down my throat to the very core of my body. It'd ignite unworldly pain to spread across every particle making up my being. The inflammation in my chest felt like 1,000 knives piercing through me all at once. Tears welled in my eyes as the pain tripled. It reached every crevice in my body, not a single muscle tenseless from the pain. Beating my soul inside and out, I gasped out. I could only hear the distinct footsteps of Lyla running away and frantically screaming for Bentley before I passed out. A world of black, stretching abyss, welcoming me into the caress of nothing. When I came to, Lyla was fast asleep beside me on a chair. Her head rested against her folded arms on the side of the bed. Judging from the bareness of the room and the unfamiliar peach-painted walls, we were in one of the spare rooms at the pack house. It was a lot closer to the field than the small house I currently lived in. Rubbing my temples, I closed my eyes shut. There was a sort of ringing in my head, a migraine that made my focus a little woozy. It hurt like hell, but it was more annoying than anything. After a few breaths, I opened my eyes and turned to look at the window. I nearly groaned out loud at the darkness just beyond the room. It was already nightfall. I slept for almost the entire day. I could faintly remember checking the time and seeing that it was only 10 in the morning when I passed out. I sighed. I'll just have to work twice as hard tomorrow to make up for today. I already felt bad for Bentley yet again finding me unconscious. My eyes drifted to the small child beside me. Her back rose and fell steadily as she breathed. A small squeeze made my eyes fall to my hand. I realized she was holding onto my finger. Her tiny fingers curled around my pinky. A frown marred on my face at the dried tear streaks down Lila's cheeks. I slowly reached over her, even though lifting my arms alone strained my sore muscles. Gently, I wiped her tears away. Lyla stirred in her sleep, but nuzzled into her folded arms against the bed. She was always a light sleeper. A breath of relief came over me when she didn't wake up. I wasn't sure how bad her reaction would be if she saw me. I must have terrified her. Images of her helplessly frightened face flashing in my mind before I forcefully shut them out. Guilt and frustration built up inside me. I didn't want her to have to see that. Of all times, it had to happen when I was with her. Even when I knew there was nothing I could have done to prevent it, I still felt responsible. Like I should have been strong enough to withstand it when no one ever could. "This isn't safe for you, Celine." I looked up upon hearing a croaky voice to see Bentley walking in with a frown. He closed the door behind him with a bouquet of roses tucked against his forearm. My lips tugged up when I realized it was the flowers he so carefully grew himself. Bentley allowed me to work on his garden, but the roses were off limits. His mate had loved his roses, and since then he wanted to be the only one taking care of it. It brought him some form of solace for his loss. Without him saying it, I knew that by growing the roses himself, he still felt her presence. He felt like she was right there with him. He was wearing a checkered shirt with long khakis, a size too big for his lanky body. He looked tired. Gray hair messy and eyes sunken in more than usual. It made me feel worse knowing he probably didn't get any sleep because he was worried about me. Bentley sighed heavily before laying the flowers on my nightstand and pulling the desk chair to sit at my right. Taking my hand in his, he furrowed his brows together before tightening his grip. "This is the 7th time this month." I swallowed thickly. Averting my gaze from him, I chewed on my lip. Fear rippled inside me from his tone. We never really talked about these attacks because I never wanted to. He knew what they were, but he never made a move to talk about it. He was aware it made me uncomfortable. So hearing Bentley bring it up now had my nerves kicking in. You slept for 2 days. My mouth parted in surprise. 2 days? This was the longest I ever slept through. Granted, this attack was far worse compared to my past ones, but this is outrageous. 2 days, a full 48 hours of sleep. Lyla, she wouldn't leave your side. She was afraid you'd leave her too. Bentley's eyes trailed over to the small body beside me. His gaze softened in sadness, like her parents. A deep stab of pain poked me in the heart. Lyla never talked about her parents. She didn't have anything to say. How could she when they were taken from her before she could even open her eyes? Still, she knew what having parents meant. What it would have meant for her if they'd lived. Bentley tightened his hold on my hand. With pursed, dry lips, he gulped. I told Alpha Oliver about what happened to you. The moment those words left his lips, I felt everything stop. My eyes widened. My heart dropped at what he said. He told him? My face paled almost immediately when his words sunk in. Oh, goddess, what were they going to do? Did they tell Landon were they going to kick me out for being unwanted? Will their views of me change? Anxiety crept up from within me when I tried to yank my hand from his hold, but he didn't let go. His face hardened as he looked over to Lyla. Sweet pea, this isn't right. You're suffering far too much. How many more times will you have these attacks every time they mate? How many more bruises will your body take? How many more times do I have to find you lying unconscious over the floor? How many more times will your pretty little eyes shed tears for that son of a bitch? Bentley's soft voice sought after my tears. I could feel them threatening to spill. I vowed to myself I wouldn't cry again, at least not in front of them. I've done that way too many times just from that day alone. I probably cried a year's worth of tears by now. Even if my heart was breaking again and again, I didn't want them to have the same impression of me as my pack did. Weak, useless, pitiful, not enough. I can't do anything about it, I whispered. My hands trembled, but Bentley's reassuring hold kept me from completely breaking apart. His warmth sent a small rush of comfort. He opened his mouth to say something when we heard a faint knock on the door. Was someone else visiting? I looked to Bentley in confusion, who gave me a small, regrettable smile and let go of my hand before getting up to open it. Alpha Oliver. Bentley dipped his head in respect as the big, burly Alpha at the doorframe nodded at him, his dark eyes sweeping across the room until they met mine. Alpha Oliver Thompson. Only pack members or close associates were allowed to call an Alpha by their first name with the title. That's why I always called him Alpha Thompson. Alpha Harrison, Landon's father, was Alpha Harrison Walker. But since I was a pack member, I was permitted to call him Alpha Harrison, whereas other wolves from different packs were required to call him Alpha Walker. It was a subtle way to show relations between wolves. A pack was like a family. Only family was allowed to get away with referring to an alpha with such intimacy as using their first name. A mate never had to use the title nor the last name. I was neither a pack member, nor was I a close associate, so I resorted to using his last name. Sure, I was staying at his pack, but my legal loyalty was still at Nightwake. I only met him a total of 3 times since my stay here. Once when I first arrived, twice when Bentley asked for permission to give me a job, and third when my first attack happened, and I fell ill for a day. He'd visited to inquire about my health or if someone had done something. I had managed to say it was just exhaustion, and he never questioned it, though I knew he didn't believe me. He probably decided against asking out of respect for me. Bentley, could you give me and Celine a moment? Please take Lyla with you. Bentley nodded at him, slowly making his way to pick up a sleepy Lyla in his arms. Her little eyes fluttered open when he scooped her up and wandered around until they fell on me. Immediately she thrashed in his hold, whining to be let go so that she could come to me, her little chubby arms reaching out to my direction as small sobs racked her body. The inner turmoil in me nearly drove me mad. My heart ached for the child, her expression cutting deep as my wolf restrained the urge to comfort her in front of the alpha. I watched as Lyla slowly disappeared with her wails echoing in the hallway. Even when she wasn't in sight, I kept staring at the door longingly. That little girl is head over heels for you." I snapped my attention to Alpha Thompson, who has a slight smile playing on his lips before dropping my gaze to my hands. Chewing on my lip, a smile appeared across my face at his words. Was it wrong to feel a little prideful over that? To feel happy at the fact Lyra had gotten so attached to me? I was just as in love with that little girl. "Bentley told me about your situation," he said softly. I felt his alert eyes observing me like he was expecting me to burst out into tears at any moment. When his glances became too much, I peered over to him, catching him rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly with his gaze dropped to the floor. Clearly the Alpha never had something like this happen. He probably didn't know what to say in fear of saying something wrong. This was why I didn't want anyone to know. The moment they did, they'd treat me like I was made out of glass. Not that my heart wasn't as fragile as one, but once something breaks, it can't be broken again, can it? "Oh," was my brilliant response. Alpha Thompson sighed loudly, sitting in the seat Bentley had sat on. If only we weren't talking about this, I would have found it funny. His large mass bent uncomfortably on a chair too small for his bulky body. He soon gave up trying to find a comfortable position and lifted his head to meet me in the eyes. Alpha Thompson was a great alpha, a great man, husband and father. He was kind, caring, strong, but disciplined. He had strict sets of morals he would stand by, and I grew to respect him tremendously, especially when he was the one who saved Lyra from her life at Red Dusk. "Celine, why didn't you say anything?" he asked exasperatedly. If I wasn't hearing things, he sounded almost disappointed. I swallowed down the lump in my throat. How could I voice out my fears, voice out my insecurities? I didn't need to feel more exposed and violated than I already did, but at the same time, something compelled me to answer. Something told me I could trust this man not to judge me like others did in Nightwake. After all, how could someone who runs a pack as peaceful and kind like this be someone untrustworthy? "I can't," I answered truthfully. I was afraid to. Alpha Thompson shook his head, clearly unhappy with the fear haunting me. His thick eyebrows pressing together and his frown deepened. He didn't understand. I didn't expect him to. "What are you afraid of, Celine? Are you afraid of that youngling? That Alpha Walker, finding out you said something?" My head snapped up with wide eyes. He called him Alpha. That could only mean he had successfully overtaken the title. I figured he would have done so sooner rather than later. His time was running out, after all. The question was, since when did he claim it? "A Alpha Walker? You mean Landon Walker? He's Alpha now?" Leaning against the chair, he folded his arms across his chest. Alpha Thompson thought for a moment before nodding solemnly. He pressed his lips together in dismay. Landon had gotten the title, mated Hestia. All he needed to do was mark her. How had he gotten away without marking her? Did he take the title first? Did he choose to disobey Nightwake traditions? Was it because she wasn't his mate that they decided to give him leeway? Everyone knew they weren't mates, so it could only mean they willingly allowed it to happen without argument. They loved her that much. She was so fit to be Luna that they overlooked his disinterest in following the proper order of things. All he had to do was mark her now. Once he'd done that, he would have completed their bond and successfully tossed ours aside. "Since when?" I asked softly. Alpha Thompson looked almost hesitant in answering, but eventually gave in with a small breath. He unfolded his arms and relaxed his hunched shoulders. He was preparing himself for my reaction. He knew that I had to know. "Approximately a week after you got here." My eyes bulged out of their sockets. A week? That's all it took him? Around 7 days since I left? If that was so, then why didn't he mark her yet? He had so much time to mark her. He let a full 2 months pass without claiming her. So what was the holdup? Is it possible he was having second thoughts? A bubble of hope formed inside me, but I quickly dismissed it. Of course he didn't. He had just finished mating her again a few hours ago. I felt stupid for even considering it. Against my better judgment, I had hoped he wouldn't mark her. Marking her was the last step to the completion of their forged bond. My wolf growled at the thought. She was still hurt over the fact our mate had sent us away and chose another over us. Above all, our blood-related sister. I was too, but it didn't affect me the way it did her. I managed to form good relationships here in Duskfall as she did, but her connection to Landon's wolf was far stronger than my connection to Landon. She was created for the sole purpose of standing beside Landon and his wolf. She existed to go hand in hand with Landon's wolf. Her connection to the pack was stronger since she was supposed to be Luna. So to have all that stripped from her was like saying her existence was futile. I nodded slowly, trying to let the information sink in. I kept my gaze on the thick blanket over my legs. Alpha Thompson remained quietly still in his seat. I knew he was still waiting for me to answer that previous question. I had a feeling he wouldn't leave if I didn't answer. A small part of me hoped he'd forgotten, but sensing his prying gaze on me told me he didn't. Reluctantly, I gave in. Everything. I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid Landon will find out, and he'll be even more disgusted by me. I'm afraid of repeating the same sob story over and over to people who ask, because it'll make it feel even realer. I laughed bitterly. I'm afraid people will look at me different. Afraid people will see me the way my family and pack members did. I'm afraid of rejection. I finally admit. My hands balled around the blanket over me, the rush of emotions hitting me all at once when I think about it. I'm so afraid of being rejected again. If my own pack family and mate can reject me, who's to say the people who I just met won't? I muster up the courage to look at him. Alpha Thompson's gaze softened. I half expected him to get angry at my insinuation that his pack members would do a complete 180 on me, but he didn't. He calmly reached over to rub my back. The touch of someone simply listening rather than responding with false pretenses soothing me far better than any therapist could. I decided to go on. I had nothing to hide anymore. There was no reason in holding back. Let me lay my heart out to people who genuinely cared. When he finally marks her, he'll transfer me back. He said so himself. The mate bond's burden will still be there, but it won't be strong enough to make him act out on instinct. I'm a different story, though, rejected and unmated. I respect myself far too much than to simply give myself away just for the sake of wearing the bond. So I'll suck it up. I'll feel every ounce of the torture from our mate bond. Not like it'll make a difference to him if it didn't. Then why don't you permanently stay here? My head shot up to him, my jaw hanging open at the bluntness of his suggestion. It wasn't uncommon for members to transfer out to other packs. Some would do it because they had mates over there, others would leave because they didn't agree with the pack's rules. To officially leave a pack, the Alpha had to agree. I knew Landon, aside from what he says, would never allow me to go. He may not have me, but that didn't mean he'd let anyone else have me either. What? Alpha Thompson smiled, looking at the closed door behind him before returning his attention to me. He looked so sure of what he said. There wasn't a string of indecisiveness in his expression. If I'm being honest, I was kind of thinking of a way to convince you to stay. It was a selfish thought on my part, but Lyra needs you. Bentley does too. The old prude hasn't had that smile on his face since his son left. He sees you as his own daughter like he does Lyra. They may not be your family, but to them, you are. He squeezed my shoulder. Staying at that pack will do you no good. No offense, but your family seems like real shitty people. If Alpha Walker tries to prevent you from making your stay here permanent, I'll personally handle it. We take care of our own, Celine. No one left behind. Just say the word and I'll assure you I'll make it happen. If we have to bring this up to the Chancellor, so be it. We'll do whatever it takes, whatever. Never in my life had people ever treated me this way. Treated me with priority. All the restraint I had on trying to be strong broke away as I cried into my hands. Wet blotches of tears collecting in my palms as Alpha Thompson patiently waited for me to calm down. When I looked up, red-eyed and all, he grinned. I'll take it as a yes. I smiled for my future, and for the first time in 2 months, it was a genuine yes. Alpha Thompson let out a huge breath before raking a hand through his thick hair. I guess he was really insistent on keeping me here for Lyra. Most of the pack members have noted that Lyra was attached to me. It brought them a sense of relief to know Lyra was finally opening up to someone. Thank goddess, I was worried I'd have bad news for Alpha Oliver. Alpha Thompson quickly stood up, the chair falling behind him. A male's shout filtered through the door. His eyes stared down at the direction of his voice. Not a second went by and the door busted open, revealing his Beta Crawford. His dark hair slicked wet against his forehead and his shirt drenched with sweat. He was breathing hard, body heaving up and down rapidly. "What's wrong?" Alpha Thompson asked, his tone intimidatingly dark. He caught a whiff of tension from his Beta and immediately knew something had happened. Beta Crawford shook his head, eyes visible with fear. A Beta shaking in his skin was never a good sign. Beta Crawford turned to look over his shoulder when a loud scream resonated down the hall. He ground down on his teeth. "Rogues. They breached our borders." Alpha Thompson's eyes flashed with deep-rooted anger. Protruding down his neck and arms were his veins. You could feel the fury oozing off him in thick waves. His wolf was fighting for control at the enemies threatening his pack. The alpha in him wanted blood. Desperately. The whites of his eyes slowly inked black. His canines elongated past his lips bared threateningly to no one in specific. A low, deep guttural growl ripped from his throat and echoed down the halls. His wolf had successfully taken over him. This was the first time I've ever seen it happen. Alpha Thompson's chest had puffed out, muscles bulging as he slightly shook in outrage. He was demonstrating his dominance before going out to face the rogues himself. He made his presence known on his territory so that whoever he crosses will know of his status. I could feel the thirst for blood in his constant growls. "Take Celine and any others to the bunker. Protect them with your life." His voice was deep, almost like there was another voice intertwining with his. Without another word, Alpha Thompson turned and made a stride toward the door, his large body radiating of pure rage in his footsteps. Beta Crawford waited until his alpha left to spring into action. The alpha command worked instantaneously. Yanking me up by the arm, he began to drag me out the door. His face hardened with new profound courage masking his previous expression. Stumbling over like a newborn fawn, Beta Crawford caught me before I completely fell and hoisted me up in his arms. He didn't say a word and only continued to silently bring us through the hall. This was damn embarrassing but necessary. I couldn't quite feel my legs yet. The attack and the bed rest for 2 days weakened my strength tremendously. My body felt like jelly. "We need to leave. Now." The initial fear in his voice was gone. The need to fulfill the orders from his alpha defeated his perception of fear. We zipped down the stairs. The pack house was completely abandoned by now. Pure terror could be heard outside. Women, men, and children filling the night air with blood-curdling screams. Beta Crawford tensed. He had the desire to aid them. His grip around me tightened slightly before he kicked open the back door and dashed outside. It was utter chaos. Fires lit up houses, bodies scattered around the plains. Blood smeared all over the buildings and soaked into the soil. Most of those who were viciously mauled on the ground were lacking a body part. Some had their chests, backs, or stomachs slashed open. Guts spilled out onto the ground. The faces of people I grew to know on more than just first-name basis staring lifelessly at me with their mouths open to scream. Only they never got the chance to. The foul smell of death and burning flesh reigned around us, but I couldn't turn away. The horror and pure devastation of reality forbid me to. Beta Crawford clenched his jaw, sorrow filling his eyes as he tore his gaze away to continue running. He had seen the people he grew up with slaughtered mercilessly. The only thing he could do was keep going, no matter how much it pained him to do so. No matter how much he just wanted to stay there and mourn for the dead. I scanned the area around us. The screaming had ceased, but this wasn't even half the population. Where was everyone? Where did Alpha Thompson go? A thunderous roar broke me from my thoughts. Quickly looking to my right, a large gray wolf with its canines snapped on a small body of a child prowled toward us. Beta Crawford stepped back, his dark eyes calculating and observing the opponent before us. A low rumble came from within the rogue's chest and slowly unhinged its jaw to drop the body. I screamed in agony. I stared at the bloody corpse of little Jason, Alpha Thompson's 3-year-old son. Beta Crawford growled, eyes heated in anger at the sight of the little alpha to be savagely chewed and killed. His skin broke in his back, trails of blood oozing from his head and torso. His shirt was almost completely torn apart. Beta Crawford's body shook with the desire to take vengeance, but he restrained himself, remembering the alpha's command. He was preparing himself to run, but quickly tossed me to the side when another wolf lunged at him from behind. I skid across the ground, the mud coating my body. Run! Beta Crawford quickly stood up. He used his hands to push himself off the ground and body slam against the gray wolf's side. The sound of bone cracking made me flinch as Beta Crawford took the two wolves head-on. He didn't have the time to shift. Both wolves would attack him before he could. He managed to grab one by the snout, but didn't get the chance to do any damage when the auburn wolf clamped down on his other hand. I had to do something, but I couldn't shift after an attack. Goddess, why? Why does this happen now? Why to them? My eyes helplessly searched for Beta Crawford's. Run! He yelled, pushing the wolves off him. He grabbed the auburn wolf's hind legs before slamming it against the gray wolf. Bentley brought Lyra to the garden. Go! At the sound of Lila's name, I gathered all the strength I could muster and forced my legs down the pathway toward the field. I tried to ignore the sound of flesh being torn into. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was when two unfamiliar snarls of victory surrounded it. I kept running. Everybody I passed by willing me to look at its direction, but I couldn't. The heavy scent of blood curling around my mind as I jumped over the fence. I couldn't see anything in the dark. Even with my senses heightened, it was too dim to see through. I whipped my head around desperately in every direction. I didn't know where to begin to look. Then I heard a scream, a little girl's scream, Lila's scream. My blood ran cold. Pushing myself harder, I rushed over to the sound, begging the moon goddess to give the strength to shift. The sluggish sound of my feet pounding down on the mud ringing in my ears when I saw a figure hunching over the ground. A man built up with heavy pounds of muscles pinned Lyra on the ground. Tears rolled down her eyes as she screamed hysterically, her legs kicking and arms trying to pull from the man's grasp. Her pants were thrown to the side, shirt ridding up her exposed chest. Her underwear was still on, but the man was quickly trying to change that. Without thinking, I rushed over and threw myself over the man's body. He fell over, my arms still wrapped tightly around his neck. Lila's screams were unceasing as she crawled away and stared at me. She cried out my name, then Bentley's before repeating in a cycle. The man was strong. He recklessly thrashed around, his hands planting firmly around my forearms in attempt to pull me off. I tightened my hold, forcing every ounce of power in me to keep my arms locked around him. I shut my eyes in pure rage. The ideas I knew the man had, if I hadn't interfered, spiked up enough emotion in me to grasp tighter. An aggravated yell tore from my lips as the man's fruitless attempts of getting me off ceased. After a few seconds, his breathing slowed. His body drooping to the ground with his head hanging loosely at his neck, I felt his heart stop. I killed a man. I killed someone. Slowly, I let my arms unwrap around his neck. His body fell over with a loud thud to give me a good view of his scarred back. I kneeled over the floor, the body a few inches from mine faced down onto the grass. The adrenaline pumping in my veins had me momentarily in shock when I felt small arms wrap around my waist. Lila's broken whimpers against my skin took me out of my trance. Cautiously, I wrapped my arms around her body and held her close. Her warmth, the only thing keeping me from losing my mind. My touch soothed her slightly as hers did for me. I swallowed. Picking myself up with Lyra in my arms, I walked over the body, not sparing another glance in both disgust of the man and disgust in myself for enjoying the feel of his life leaving his body in my arms. My wolf growled in approval, her canines bearing in pride. The desire for blood was clear in her beady black eyes. We needed to get out of here. Forcing myself to think straight, I suddenly remembered Bentley. He was supposed to be with Lyra. I looked around only to find him missing. Panic spread inside me. He couldn't be. Turning to the opposite direction, I ran with Lyra still sobbing in my arms toward his garden. Leaves and branches slapped against my skin as I ran, but I could barely feel it. I was too focused and engrossed in trying to find him to notice the small cuts spreading across my skin. When we reached the front gate, I looked around wildly. I was desperate to catch sight of the one person who showed me what a true father was like. His flower patches were still the same. It was completely untouched. I snuggled Lyra tighter against my chest, her face buried in my shirt as I felt myself freeze. I whimpered, legs shaking as my legs gave away. Falling to the ground on my knees, I held Lyra's head to my neck so she couldn't look back, her wet drops of tears rolling down my skin. I stared in complete silence. His checkered shirt was ripped open at the back, his body face down with his head hidden in the cluster of his dandelions. His arms and legs were spread apart, his right forearm missing. A sharp sob pulled from my lips, but I forced it down with my other hand. Hot tears blurred my vision, but it wasn't enough to wash away the image in my head. Bentley's body, surrounded and hidden by the flowers he so carefully nurtured, embraced him, as if protecting him from the world, the moonlight's soft shine casting a shadow over his body, and his precious white roses tainted in deep red. "Selly? Where's Bentley?" Lyra tried pulling from my grasp in impatience, but I didn't let her move away. Goddess knows what awful thing will scar her memories of him. My eyes never strayed away from Bentley's back. It was like any second from now he would just sit up, wipe the dirt off his clothes, and say he's fine. It didn't feel like I lost him even when the evidence was right in front of me. I couldn't feel him breathing, but somehow a small part of me still believed he'd wake. That small, delusional, helplessly hopeful part of me. I couldn't find myself to admit it, to admit he was truly gone. It was just so sudden. Everything happened way too fast. So fast that I couldn't comprehend it. I had to be stuck in some nightmare. A nightmare I desperately wanted to wake up from, so that when I open my eyes, I'll find Bentley working on his truck, his hands all dirty from oil. He'd be wearing his overalls paired with his work boots like he always did. He'd tell me to take a break, maybe spend some time with Lyra over the fields, and help her plant some seeds. To find little Jason running around with a stick, he found chasing after other pups with their squeals sounding down the pack territory. Luna Thompson would be chatting away with other female wolves about the next feast we'd have, the pack warriors teaching the teens how to fight and train properly for the future. Anna, Oscar, Remy, Hardin, Cindy, June, Brenda. All those faces attached to the names I knew so well that I'd never see again. Their expressions of their last moments of life, twisted in pure horror, was forever engraved in my mind. Those soulless eyes staring right through me. Some had serene, unsuspecting faces. Those who were caught off guard, never truly knowing what fate had in store for them until it was too late. I shuddered, forcing my eyelids to shut. I couldn't let myself stray away from my objective. I couldn't bring back the dead. My thoughts went to Lyra. The best I could do was make sure another wouldn't fall. There was nothing but rubble left for us here. I couldn't feel any of my bonds with the members connect. My wolf had gotten aqua-tinted to their wolves and formed a makeshift bond that allowed me to feel them, albeit faintly. It didn't give me much information about their whereabouts or thoughts, but I could feel their presence on land if I searched hard for it. And searching for it, I did. I just didn't find any. They were wiped out. Lyra stuck on like a leech, clinging onto me like a life preserver. She was definitely traumatized from her earlier incident. She was touched, and she saw me kill a man all in the same minute. Maybe there was a small part of her that feared me now. I shook away the thought and frowned at her appearance. Her curly brown hair was a mess on top her head. Mud, strands of grass, and small sticks coated her locks along with her clothes. Her top was getting dirty from the mud on my shirt, but she didn't seem to mind. She held tighter despite the cold water saturating through the fabric and soaking into hers. Lifting my head, I tried to scan around the area. There were tons of rogues prowling around the territory, loud howls singing into the night from every direction to state their position. From what I could hear, they almost had every perimeter secured. All except one, the secret exit near the bunker. About 30 of the rogues were roaming around the borders, securing the exits to make sure no wolf could get out or get in. The only advantage I have is that I knew the land better, but who's to say they didn't already scout out the area before attacking? Confusion struck within me. How could they have possibly breached the heavily guarded barriers? Duskfall had barbed wires, 20-foot fences, motion detectors, outposts every few feet from each other. How in the world did they manage to weasel themselves in? Lyra whimpered as if sensing my inner turmoil. Tilting my head down, I loosened the hold I was unconsciously tightening around her. Her nails dug into my skin, but I ignored the slight pain. She was feeling antsy, clearly frazzled from everything that happened thus far. I had to be strong for her. She had no one to depend on but me. If I lost my will now, there'd be no way we'd get out of this alive. Keeping that as my mindset, I hardened myself. I compelled my nerves to steel. Being afraid won't solve anything. I stood up, backtracking from the garden before making a dash to the woods. My guard was up. I threw one last glance at Benelte to bid a silent goodbye before running as fast as I could down the narrow pathway. The rogues were smart enough to cause the fires. Smoke collectively formed a smog around the territory, enwrapping the small houses in the thick swamp of harmful fumes. Not only did it mess with our sense of smell, but also our sight. It was a disaster, calamity's kiss falling upon our pack. Zooming by the aftershadows of the trees, I narrowed my gaze down the course leading to the bunker. I believed some of the pack members managed to hide away before getting caught. We had protocols and practice situation to ensure everyone was quick enough to get there in time. Kind of like drills. No one but the pack members knew of the bunker. It was created for emergencies like this. A witch had cast a protective spell on the structure, hiding its appearance to those unwelcome. The rogues wouldn't have been able to see the bunker or catch a scent on it. It was the perfect hideout, completely invisible to the senses unless given permission by the Alpha. When we reached the entrance, I noticed the familiar marking on the stone wall, a black circle with a red insignia inside it. A witch's mark. The rogues had a witch with them. That could only mean they had undone the protective spell. I frantically went down the stairs and almost tripped along the way. Stumbling with my feet, I grabbed onto the railing for support. Abruptly, I stopped when we reached the bunker. The door was wide open, a foul smell of flesh reaching my nose. Crestfallen and horrified, I didn't move an inch. I didn't need to be a genius to figure out what happened in there. Lyra squirmed in my hold, the stench bothering her as she tugged on my shirt. I forced the bile down my throat. The disturbing smell of flesh and blood made me want to hurl. I didn't want to walk in and see the bloodbath that took place in there. I turned on my heel and jogged up the stairs. I held Lyra closer and took off in the other direction from where we first came from. Everything was hard to see through the fog. The eerie ambience of the deserted land brought chills to my spine. The place that would have been crowded with people, completely desolate from use. Lyra's soft sob vibrated into my chest. She had clutched onto my shirt, her face pressed hard onto my collarbone. I moved her back slightly, cupping her wet cheek against my palm and tilted her head up. Her eyes were puffy, lips swollen and trembling. As quietly as I could, I whispered down to her, "Lyra, I need you to be very quiet." I looked from my left to the right before turning back to her once I saw the coast was clear. I was completely on edge. I felt like at any moment one of the rogues will just jump out and attack us. My paranoia brought on thoughts that scared me to the bones. Thoughts like, what would happen if they caught us, or if they'd just kill us on spot? The bad guys will hear us if you're not. Lyra's cries stopped as she stared up at me. She sniffled, rubbing her little fists against her eyes. They'll get us like they got Bentley? My chest tightened at the name. With a curt nod, I skimmed my thumb over the edge of her eye. Wiping away her tears, I grimaced at the afterthought of Bentley, his body and blood flashing through my mind, the same kind of state we'd be in if we didn't escape. The cold wind brewing over us bit into my flesh, encouraging goosebumps to rise from my skin. The call of midnight just above our heads. Yes. Nodding to herself, she wrapped her arms around my neck and buried her entirety into my embrace. Her soft whimpers ceased as she remained still in my arms. She was resolved in keeping quiet, knowing just how crucial silence was to our survival. I carefully walked down the slope. I was freezing in my wet clothes, the wind seeping through the fabric. The pack was most likely deserted. Most wolves killed if they didn't escape. Unable to think of anything else, I reached out in my bond to call for my parents. I hoped that after reaching them, they'd call for reinforcements. The beta had enough power to summon a small group of warriors to a pack in need without the alpha's supervision. It was rare that these things happened, but if they did, the beta wouldn't have done so unless absolutely necessary. I kept trying to search for our connection, but I couldn't find it. My wolf tilted her head in confusion. My eyebrows knit together until I understood what happened. Both my mother and father's walls were up. I couldn't get through to them. They were purposely shutting me out. Not even my wolf could get through to their wolves. I haven't tried to reach out to them in 2 months, and now I knew that if I did, it wouldn't have gone through. This was their way of officially cutting ties with me. My chest burned in grief. I could feel a lump weighing down in the pit of my stomach. Surely Hestia wouldn't have done the same. I tried searching for her bond in my head. Nothing. Feeling sick all of a sudden, I flinched hearing sticks snap from behind me. I didn't wait to turn around to jump behind a tree. Pressing my back to the bark, I held Lyra protectively against me. Her figure quivered in my hold because she too heard it. I waited. Slowly, when nothing could be heard, I peeked over the trunk. 3 wolves were roaming down the woods. They looked around, eyes searching with snouts raised in the air in attempt to catch a scent. The fire's fumes made it impossible. I held my breath. Placing a hand over Lila's mouth, her breathing harbored. I stood completely still. I hoped they didn't feel my presence. I was sure they couldn't smell me, but hearing me was a different issue. The tiniest bit of noise would get their attention. A sudden cracking reverberated down the woods. "All clear?" a masculine voice asked. A similar sound repeated before I heard the rustling of leaves coming closer. "Clear," a different voice responded, this time female. The third wolf shifted. Lyra peered up to me with wide eyes. She knew these were the bad guys that got Bentley. Shaking in her thin shirt, she turned away in fear. Her little arms unwrapped itself around me and bent so she could cover her ears with her hands. I wanted to console her, to assure her everything was all right, but now was not the time. If I wasn't careful, there will never be a time. A cackle echoed. "And they call us heartless," the male voice said amusedly. A loud crash, mixing with a frustrated groan of aggravation followed by the fall of a tree, sounded. The crows cawing flew to the opposite direction from where they originally perched on. I resisted the urge to make a sound, pressing my hand down on Lila's mouth harder when I felt a whimper try to slip through. The feminine voice laughed. "To think that Alpha ignored our threats. They think too little of us. How careless." She walked on. "I heard the beta sent his daughter here," the female said smugly, the mock and taunt clear in her tone. She was feeling quite proud of herself. My eyebrows rose up when I realized what she had said. "Beta's daughter?" I froze, turning to the direction of where they were, and felt my heart pound. Were they talking about me? The beta sent his daughter here, even though we've been sending out warnings since 3 months ago? The third voice asked, not really expecting an answer. Warnings? My jaw clenched. My father knew? They all knew there'd be an attack? They knew and chose not to do anything? My tongue darted out, licking my dried lips as I listened in. Anxiety crept up behind me. They were probably a few feet from where I stood behind the tree. They were only getting closer as they walked down the clearing. I couldn't exactly run when they'd all chase after me and inevitably catch me. I decided that waiting out was the most logical route to handle this. The fucker clearly wanted her to die. She was unwanted. The mole reported the alpha was her mate, yet the little shit rejected her. Picked her sister, apparently. Guess it'd make it easier for him if his mate died. He laughed. Ain't that a tragedy? Hot, fresh sets of tears rolled down my cheeks. In anger, I forced the emotions within me to calm. I couldn't have them sense my presence. I wasn't too worried about Lyra since she was still a child. It was harder to detect children's presence since they haven't shifted yet. Wers who had their wolves were very noticeable if they couldn't hide their presence. The more emotion you felt, the clearer you were to their sight. My thoughts circled back to my family. They knew. They received and ignored all warnings about an attack. They sent me here willingly to die. They blocked my bond with them because they knew I would try to reach out for help they would deny me. They had forsaken me and left me to the trenches of death, the grim reaper, the only one willing to catch me when I fall. The ultimate betrayal of the people I grew up with. The man I called my father, the woman I called my mother, and the child I called my sister. I didn't allow myself to even think about that man I called my mate. I should have known they were heartless enough to lead me to my demise. I didn't think they were heartless enough to abandon them. The Nightwake pack had more than enough resources to send help, whether it be food, shelter, or manpower. If the pack warriors were to come running, they'd get here in an hour, compared to 2 days by car. The warriors were much more in terms of speed and endurance. A normal wolf would get here in at least a day, even after shifting. I was angry at the fact they allowed innocent lives to get involved. Packs never abandoned allies. A werewolf's word was supposed to be law. Nightwake and Duskfall were allies since 1807. They had the treaties and everything. They purposely ignored the message and chose to overlook the attack. They gave shoulder to people in need of help. The sad thing was, 3 months ago, Alpha Harrison was still in charge. Hating Landon for it would have been easier, but knowing that the Alpha even I respected had a part in this was simply too disappointing. They chose to let these people drown in a sea of blood. They chose to allow the rogues to triumph. It would seem they were traitors in more ways than one. "Are you sure we got everyone, Draxon?" Draxon snarled at the question. His aggression rolled off him in huge bulks. My wolf rumbled at the pressure. She didn't like the dominance he was omitting to us, even when it wasn't on purpose. She felt the urgency to get Lyra out of here as quickly as we could. She knew the chances of us escaping was only slimming down the closer these wolves got. They all radiated a form of power. Wild, untamed, and raw power they weren't afraid of using without discretion. "I'm sure you know the consequences for questioning me, Fio. Or must I remind you?" I heard a slight whimper echo. Ripples of fear reaching me from this Fio person. I took a risk. I peered over the tree trunk just enough so I can get a quick glance of the rogues. The 3 wolves were in human form, completely in the nude. Nudity wasn't really a big issue anymore within packs, especially with rogues. Showing off their structures was like demonstrating their power, a silent presentation of status. The thicker in muscles they were, the more power they held. The female in the trio, bending her head down in submission, trembled in her spot. I could guess that the male standing firm in front of her was Draxon. His fists were bald, dark eyes narrowed down at the female. His head was shaven clean on one side with a tattoo of a dagger running down the side of his skull to the very length of his neck. He was massive, almost as muscular as Alpha Thompson. He had streaks of black ink curving down his biceps and over his chest, dark hair dripping with blood over his skin. The other male, whose name I still didn't know, had curly dark locks reaching his shoulders. I didn't have time to continue observing them when he spoke. "Relax, Draxon. She didn't mean it like that. You know Zeneron will have our heads if we fail. He wants the pack wiped out clean, no survivors." After a second of silence, the pressure diminished. It seemed like Curlyhead's words knocked some sense into him. Fio visibly relaxed and sent Curlyhead a look of thanks when she felt Draxon's anger subside. I couldn't blame her for feeling so submissive. His power was tremendously heavy. Not as heavy as an alpha's, but quite notable for someone not in power. Dropping his shoulders to relax himself, Draxon sighed heavily. He pinched the bridge of his nose irritably, with his temper threatening to return. He took a moment to recollect his thoughts before turning to look at Curlyhead. "Call the mutts. We've done our job here. It's time we go back." Bowing at his order, Curlyhead stilled, his eyes blanking out as he spoke to the other members through mind link. When he finished, the three turned around without another word. They hunched over the ground, hands digging into the soil with their backs arched up. They were mid-shifting, with fur starting to pierce through their skin, when Theo suddenly looked over her shoulder. Quickly, I held still against the tree trunk. My breathing stopped, my heart racing, and the damned migraine came back. Did she see me? A second went by in silence. By the sound of it, none of them have shifted. There was no bone cracking or paw pounding. There wasn't the tiniest bit of shuffling around the leaves scattered all over the ground to indicate that they've moved. The slightest of movements would have been heard, especially with my heightened hearing. Yet there came none. I broke into cold sweat. In that split second, I tried racking my brain apart, trying to think of a good way to escape. A way that would give us more than a 50% possibility of survival. It's not like I could climb a tree with Lyra with me. Time was not on our side. The rogues held their positions. Theo must have caught a feel of my presence and notified her colleagues through MindLink. The initial pressure I felt before returned at full blast, if not tripling. All of them, with their power combined, made my bones go weak. Only this time, it was directed at me. I could feel their savage intentions expel from their auras. Lyra must have felt it too, as she began to quiver in my arms. It was a do-or-die situation. Any moment now, they'd lunge at me. I wasn't sure if they knew my exact location, but chances are, they did. I cursed under my breath, and with a second on my watch, I bolted down the domain. The fog encompassing the plains made running harder, but at the same time, hiding easier. I could easily lose them if I run fast enough. I could hear the three wolves quickly chasing after me, their ferocious snarls egging me on. Sliding down the mound, I turned over my shoulder to see the three of them in their wolf forms. Their paws hammered down into the dirt under our feet, their speed increasing as they slowly closed the distance. Cutting corners was the only way I could shake them off. Pushing myself as fast and as far as I could get us, I jumped over the stream and nearly got out when another wolf coming from the opposite side caught me by the leg. Canines descended down and broke into my skin, drawing drops of blood to trail down my calf. He held my leg in his jaw, biting down with as much force as he could before I kicked at his muzzle. It let go instantly, shaking its head to get rid of the damage. The other three were quickly approaching. With Lyra still in my arms, I braced myself for impact and shut my eyes, but snapped them open when I heard a furious rumble from the front. Craning my head up, I saw a bloody Alpha Thompson in front of me, holding onto the wolf's jaw with his bare hands. Tearing it apart, he threw the limp body to the side, puffing out his chest as the three wolves halted. Their dark eyes zeroed in on their fallen comrade before shifting to Alpha Thompson in anger. They studied him, fully aware that he was an alpha. The medium-sized wolf tilted its head, pacing to the right, the other going to the left. The biggest one, who I assumed was Draxon, remained in the middle, eyes narrowed down on me. Leave. Alpha Thompson bellowed to me without turning. He was breathing hard, his body all scratched up with pieces of flesh torn off. The three wolves quickly launched at him when they realized he was stalling for time. Taking all of them at once, he pushed his body forward, hands grasping at any part of their bodies before hitting as hard as he could. He managed to push one off, the smaller of the three sniveling at its broken rib. They didn't waste any time before lunging toward him again, catching his arm in one jaw and his right leg in the other. Alpha Thompson groaned, frigidly trying to tear his arm out of the wolf's mouth. He kicked at the wolf, trying to shake it off. Scrambling to get up, I sprint toward the exit of the pack territory. I didn't wait to hear the increase of growls heading toward our direction. The ground shook under me. The rogues called for reinforcements. Panting out loudly, I rushed down the small hill and nearly tripped in the process. I was so close to the gate when something large collided into me. I yelped, my hold on Lyra slipping as she fell to the other side of the ground with me rolling over the grass. I winced in pain, the arm I landed on broken and throbbing with hurt. A moment of haziness washed over me, my head going woozy as I tried to focus my vision by blinking a few times. I raised my head, trying to see what had crashed into me, only to fall silent. Draxon stood there in his human form. A smirk was in place as he walked ever so slowly toward me in mock. I hissed, forcing myself to move. My arms wobbled when I tried to push myself off the ground, only to be slammed down when Draxon's foot pushed on my back. When I resisted, he pushed harder. I could feel my bones cracking under the weight of his foot. A laugh pulled from his lips, deep, croaky, and full of amusement. Tilting his head to the side with a cocked brow, he sighed exaggeratedly before winding his leg back and kicking me in the side. I felt a bone shatter inside from the impact. A huff of air forcibly kicked out of me. I coughed, my stomach twisting in agony as my body took on a curled position. Blood trickled down my mouth. I laid on my side, my arms going over my stomach protectively when I noticed Lyra sitting on her knees staring at me with misty eyes. Cuts adorned her face, arms and legs. The fall had hurt her far more than I thought. She sat there completely scared and confused on what to do. She just stared at me in question. Draxon noticed my attention elsewhere, curiously looking in the direction I stared at, and froze at what he found. He turned back to me, a sinister smile stretching across his face as he strode over to Lyra. I could feel my mouth opening, my voice finding itself to scream out, "No! Stop! Leave her alone!" But he didn't. Using my forearms as a grip, I desperately tried to crawl toward her, but it was too late. Lyra screamed as Draxon bent over to grab her by the neck roughly. He held her up like she was weightless. Flickering my gaze to his other hand, my eyes widened at the ascending claws coming from the tips of his fingers. A whimper broke out from me, my wolf growing loud in my ears but unable to do anything. I could feel my eyes water, my heart raging on in panic at what was to come. Draxon gave me one last glance, his eyes holding mine, and he smiled. Then as quick as he did, he punctured his claws into Lyra's stomach, ripping a line down her flesh. She screamed hauntingly, tears running down her cheeks as her face contorted in unmeasurable pain. Eyebrows pressed together, lips parting widely, body convulsing from the damage she took. Her blood bled into her shirt, staining the fabric damp. She gurgled, choking from the grip Draxon had around her neck. I felt my claws extending, my fur starting to bristle out. I still couldn't shift, but my wolf was desperately making an attempt. She went against reality, trying to wedge herself in the seat of control. I see her throwing herself against my walls, head smashing against her barriers in brashness, her rabid, feral snarls resonating in my head as her black eyes glowed lividly. It was suicide. I could die from the overwhelming stress burdening my body. I no longer had control of my emotions. They spiraled out, willing my wolf to come forth to wreak havoc on all who dared to hurt us. I knew the chances of dying were high, but if it meant saving Lyra, I was willing to go through with it. The same thirst for blood I felt over the man who had pinned Lyra under him returned with the same intensity. My blood pumped with desire to see him bleed, eyes seeing red as my body moved on its own accord. With a cry, I hurled myself up, throwing my body in his direction. I elbowed him, getting him to let go of the little girl before stumbling back over his feet. Angry eyes searched wildly for the source as they fell on me. He growled, muscles taut in rage. His aura no longer took its effect on me. I was far too clouded with the impulse of impaling him with my claws to take notice of the murderous looks he threw me. In a nanosecond, he slung himself at me and withdrew his hands back to grab me. His bloodied claw swiped at my arm, a hiss leaving my lips when he grazed me enough to break skin. I raised my leg, kicking him at his waist with hard force. I heard a painful creak sound from his body. Draxon snarled. His eyes dropped to his scratches and the place I kicked him at. He was angry. I was sure I left a bruise there, but it wasn't enough to break a bone. I had no prior training skills. I was relying solely on basic instinct. Animalistic, primal instincts. Draxon didn't waste another minute before launching his other attack on me, but I managed to deflect it. I moved aside before he could reach me. Peeking over to Lyra, blood was beginning to pool around her. She laid there, coughing out blood as she cried silently. Her head turned to the side to watch me. Her eyes were already starting to droop. She didn't have much time left. Tightening down on my jaw, I faced Draxon head-on, ignoring my wolf's barks to stall. She was guiding me, telling me what to do. She told me to push harder, and so I did. With everything I had, I slid over the ground and managed to trip him. He fell hard on the floor, not having enough time to regain his composure when I straddled him. I snaked my arms around his neck, my legs secured around his waist, and tightened my hold. My broken arm hurt so much, a sense of fire burning through my tissues at the feel. Draxon stirred around violently. He elbowed me in my stomach, forcing my hold to loosen, but I grabbed hold of his hair and forced his head against the ground multiple times. Slamming his skull down with more force each time, his body weakened. He went limp. Some blood poured out of his head, unconscious but not dead. The sound of footsteps quickly advancing broke me out of my bloodlust trance. Help was on the way. Help for him, that is. Getting off of him, I limped my way to Lyra, carefully pulling her in arms, and tried not to cry at her gaping wounds. The pain of my broken arm soon forgotten about. Her face had paled, lips shaking and turning blue. She was dying. She whimpered, squeezing my shirt in her fist. Swallowing, I forced a smile on my face as I looked down at her. The facade I forced on my face trembling, no matter how hard I tried to keep it straight. Yes, baby? Running down the exit, I forced the exhaustion trying to overtake me out of my head. My body willed me to take a rest, my eyelids losing the strength to keep them open. Shaking off my tiredness, I bit down on my lip to stimulate pain. But it wasn't enough. Against everything I had, I prayed so desperately to the moon goddess who'd ignored all my prayers before. I begged her to take my life instead of Lila's. I begged her to listen to my pleas and spare the innocent child's life. I knew that it was idiotic, but I had nothing else I could have done, nothing else I could offer. I'm scared, she whispered. Lyra sobbed, eyes glassy with tears, her little fingers curling around my shirt. Mama, I'm scared. My heart broke. The composure I tried to maintain breaking as my own tears broke through. Kissing her forehead, I set her down, ripping my shirt to wrap around her wound. Her blood quickly soaked through it. Negative thoughts filled my mind one by one, telling me she wouldn't make it, telling me it was my fault for being too weak, telling me that I failed her just like everyone else. Sweetheart, you have to hold on to it, okay? I took her hands in mine and laid it over her wound. She winced, crying harder at the pain. She barely shook her head before I pressed them against her wounds harder. Scooping her up in my arms, I ran forward. I couldn't keep count of how much time had passed. I could only hear her heartbeat slowing down. I was losing time. Lila's warm blood dripped down my arms. Suddenly, I remembered one more thing. Landon. Throwing my pride, anger, humiliation, betrayal away, I reached out to him. He didn't have a wall up. I began to feel hopeful. My wolf howled, feeling Landon's wolf perk at our attempt at communication. A burst of happiness swelling in my chest, but it came down all too quickly, like a metal wall suddenly clamping down. He blocked us out the moment he felt me call for him, and not a minute later, excruciating pain shot up at my neck. I felt like I was being skinned alive. My knees bucked, my body falling over to the ground once more. I tried to go on to the bond, slamming everything I had frantically against his walls. He would feel my desperation. He'd feel how badly I was trying to break, though, to him. And he ignored me. As the pain in my neck pulsed through, my wolf howled in agony. Curling herself in the corner of my mind, she scratched at her chest with her claws. Rabid growls surrounding her as she kept clawing at herself. She was trying to kill herself. Landon had marked my sister. Hestia had marked Landon. Tears ran down the side of my face, falling to Layla's pale cheek. I urged my legs to keep moving, but every wave of pain coming over me immobilized my body. My legs paralyzed and unmoving, twitching uncontrollably. No, 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 I cried hoarsely. My nails dug into the ground in a pathetic attempt to crawl my way down. I dragged my body over the soil, collecting mud on the way. Thuds pounding in my skull had me sobbing at my weakness. The last fragment of my bond to Landon cruelly snapping apart. I felt everything. The moon goddess's punishment for going against her blessings. A punishment I wasn't deserving of. I felt a drop of water hit my forehead. It started to rain. The water puddled around my body, rolling off my skin and soaking in my hair. the cool comfort of rain doing nothing to ease the fire burning in my abdomen. My strength slowly dispersed from inside me. I felt so cold but so hot. Shiver after shiver, the heat in my body left me defenseless. I kept holding on, trying my hardest to keep going. Lyla's breathing was shallow, her small chest lifting and falling slowly. All color was draining from her face. Then suddenly another wave of pain overcame me. They were mating again, this time a lot more intense because of the aftershock of marking. My claws extended out, my body moved on its own. My wolf was trying to take control, to end the life I had because of our mate. She was going crazy, not thinking clearly and purely acting on emotion, a sort of high soaking my mind to numbness. Mama. Slowly my eyes started to close. Despite the desperation to keep myself awake, I was slipping into the darkness, consuming me whole. I forced my head to the side, seeing Lyla's hazel eyes piercing into me, her hand outreached to touch me but failing to. Spurring the last remaining strength inside me, I tried to lift my hand to touch her, to feel her soft curls in my hand, but the only thing I could move were my fingers. No, Lila, please, no, please. God, no, baby, no. I whispered. The feel of my tears sliding down my cheek, washed away from the rain, was the last thing I could remember before passing out. Darkness. I was laying in an ocean of darkness, unable to see, feel, or move anything. Only my mind was conscious, my senses all numbed out except my hearing and smell. I gradually picked up on the faint sound of something beeping. I don't know where I am, but my sense of smell returned. I caught whiffs of multiple wolf scents, but none of them are anyone that I recognize. That could only mean I was in uncharted territory. Alpha Meredith is here. She wants to see the girl, said a soft feminine voice. I heard someone respond, but I couldn't catch what he said. Next thing I know, I heard the door creak and close shut. I was alone. I couldn't feel any other presence in the room except mine. Alpha Meredith? Alpha Meredith Crestfield? Isn't she the alpha of the Greyhound pack? The only female alpha on the board as of right now? I felt myself begin to panic. If I was on Greyhound territory, then I was on enemy territory. Neither Duskfall or Nightwake were allies with Greyhound. This was looking bad. My eyes suddenly fluttered open upon command, bright light invading my sight, making me squint in discomfort. Blinking away the confusion, I tried to sit up. My body felt so rigid, so stiff. I gasped out, feeling an ache shoot up everywhere just from trying to move. I let myself fall back into the bed, turning my head to the side. The first thing I saw was the lavender paint on the walls. A few paintings of scenery hung up with a two-person couch pressed to side near the window. I was in bed, dressed in a hospital gown with an IV needle punctured in my arm. Sweeping my eyes across the room, I noticed a small vase of carnations on the coffee table. What the hell happened? I tried to remember the last thing I did before passing out, but it only made my head hurt. Everything was a blur. I groaned, grasping my forehead in my hands when the door slammed open. I quickly sat up despite the immediate protest of my body. I see you're awake. A tall, older woman with gray hair tied into a bun stood at the doorway. She was dressed in a black blazer, dress pants, and flats, her intense hazel eyes peering appraisingly at me. I didn't miss the way her eyes scanned down my body with slight scrutiny. She was definitely the Alpha. Alpha Meredith Crestfield. The power she was emitting told me so. If anyone other than I was sitting here, they would have bowed their head in submission. But something told me not to. Something told me to hold my ground and keep my head high. I opened my mouth to say something but couldn't find my voice. So instead, I simply nodded. The Alpha seemed pleased with something. I don't know if it was because she was happy I can understand her, or if she was happy I wasn't backing down. Normally, Alphas hated to be challenged or intimidated. It made them feel like their power and strength was being questioned. I guess it was one of those Alpha territorial things. Alpha Crestfield sighed through her nose. Walking to my side, she stood straight and tall. I couldn't understand why I felt such a connection to her. I wasn't feeling scared, nor was I really panicking now that I met her face to face. I felt similar to her on a spiritual level. My wolf was basking in her presence as well. A little confused but happy to be near her. What the actual hell? You're on Greyhound territory, my dear? She said suddenly, her voice void of emotion. I swallowed. Was this the part she told me I was going to be held captive, and that the only way for me to return home was by talking to Landon? Anger soared through my veins at the name. The man who was supposed to love me, cherish me, understand me, had betrayed me in the worst of ways. I might have accepted his decision to reject me, but I would never forgive the fact he decided not to help Duskfall. My breathing hitched. Lyla? I quickly looked up at the Alpha, my eyes wide in realization. The little girl. I was with Lyla. Where is she? Is she okay? The blankness on Alpha Crestfield's face faltered. Her lips tugged down the tiniest bit before she hid it well. For a split second, I could see something under her facade, something I could associate myself with for the past few months. Sadness. She didn't need to say anything. I knew, deep down inside, what happened. I knew with all my heart that my precious little angel didn't make it, but I still betted on that 0.1% chance that she survived. Even with all the odds against it, I hoped. Hope that had shattered with the way the Alpha's gaze dropped. Staring at her with all the courage I could muster, my lips moved on their own. Let me see her? Please? Alpha Crestfield's eyes snapped up to me, a small huff of breath leaving her. She looked reluctant. She was more than wary of me, and it was understandable seeing how I got here, but I just needed to see her. I needed to. If it meant fighting my way to see her, then so be it. Please. I'm begging you. Finally, her hazel eyes softened at my blue ones. She nodded in agreement. I'll get you a wheelchair. No, I said, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. I'd rather walk. Pressing her lips in a thin, hard line, she nodded again. The nurses who were standing right outside came in. They all fussed over me, helping me get up and removing the IV needle from my arm. Embarrassingly enough, I could barely walk. My arm had already healed, and so did the minor injuries all over my body. With the exhaustion and trauma I'd undergone, it wasn't a surprise I hadn't completely healed yet. Wolves may heal faster, but we weren't immune to human injuries and severe exhaustion. I was still a little sore, but in wholeness, I was fine. One of the nurses held me up, tucking her arm around my waist, and helped me keep up with the Alpha. We walked out of the room and into the hallway. We were in the pack house. A few curious wolves looked at me in question, their probing gazes drilling holes into my back as we passed by. I tried not to let it bother me when some would whisper to each other about who I was. To most of them, I was a poor survivor of the Duskfall pack, if not the only one. We walked down the corridor and down the stairs until we reached a huge metal door guarded by 2 warriors. The 2 were talking to a lean man dressed formally. Alpha Meredith. The man was wearing a white button-down and bowed at Alpha Crestfield. His gaze shifted to me. His eyes widened by a fraction before returning back to the Alpha. Are you here to see? He cleared his throat uncomfortably. The bodies? I flinched at the last word. Did they collect everyone's body and bring them here? Alpha Crestfield nodded once, not bothered by his words. Pursing his lips together, he made way for us to pass and opened the metal door. A gush of cool air smacked me in the face. The Alpha and a few of her men walked in first. I allowed them to get a few steps ahead of me before making any more to get inside. I followed, taking cautious steps in, and held back a sob at the sight. Bodies in white body bags were set up in a line. About 40 of them were in here. I sucked in a shaky breath, looking at the bodies I undoubtedly know but couldn't bear to see. I felt a squeeze on my shoulder. Looking at the hand over my skin, I found the nurse who was holding me. She shot me a sad smile, sympathy crossing her gentle features. I couldn't bring myself to smile or say a word of thanks for her attempt for comfort. Feeling so much at the same time that I couldn't feel it anymore made me this way. I was so far gone. The rest of them were unsalvageable, Alpha Crestfield explained. She looked at the sea of bodies with false indifference. I could feel her sadness radiate off her, but she wouldn't let it show on her face. Not in front of me, not in front of her pack members. Just limbs and pieces left behind. And the Alpha? Alpha Crestfield went quiet. I looked at her, surprised to see her lips forming a deep frown. Dismembered and tossed in the river with the Luna. My eyes widened as a sharp whimper left me, my wolf's ears hanging low with her tail in between her legs. Her sadness mixed with mine as we thought back to the kind words of the Alpha, our Alpha. A whole bloodline was erased. The Alpha, the Luna, and then their son. The rogues really didn't leave anything behind. Nothing except me. The girl. I stiffened. She's over there. I followed Alpha Crestfield to the corner of the morgue, a small body bag laid on the table. I looked at the Alpha, her mouth not moving but her eyes telling me to go on. Lifting my hand up, I took the zipper in my fingers and slowly unzipped the bag. A wad of curly brown hair peeked through, her face pale without blood to color her skin, her eyes closed and thick lashes casting shadows under her eyes, her small button nose, dry and colorless lips in a pout. She looked so at peace, as though she was sleeping and not completely out of my reach. "Oh, how did you find me?" Alpha Crestfield stood behind me. She placed a hand on my back, her warmth sending a soothing touch to both me and my wolf. She felt so motherly. "You were within my territory, only 6 minutes away." My eyes went misty with tears that refused to fall. After all the crying I've done, I couldn't handle it anymore. I was tired trying to be strong, tired of trying to stop it. I knelt down, sniffling as I wrapped my arm over her cold, lifeless body. Her words calling me Mama, replaying in my head. Pressing my head on her stomach, I cried for my loss. Cried for the people I grew to love, but lost all too quickly. I cried for the weakness I had. Cried for my inability to have done something. Cried for the lives I desperately wanted to save. Cried for the fact I was left alone yet again. Cried for the family I held love for, only to find out they wanted me dead. Cried for the mate that cruelly abandoned me when I needed him most. Cried for letting Lyra slip through my fingers. But most of all, I was angry. Angry at the people who had done this. Angry at my biological family. Angry at the bond that ruined me inside and out. Angry at the moon goddess who seemed to be so hell-bent on bringing me misfortune. Angry at Landon and Hestia for mating and marking each other, causing me to pass out with Lyra dying within my arm's reach. Angry at myself for not being able to push through when help was literally 6 minutes away. Had I kept pushing, kept going, had I not passed out, I would have had a chance to save her. A slim chance, but a chance regardless. A chance I would have taken for anything. I was angry at my powerlessness, angry at the fact I was proving my parents right by letting everyone I cared for down. Angry for everything that has happened to me. Angry for having my happiness stripped away when I finally acquired it. Tears trailed down my face, eyes heated with hatred burning deep in my soul. My hands were clenched, body shaking with fury that needed to be released on those rogues. I swore with everything inside me I would get revenge. Be it now or in decades, I will make them pay. All of them. "Your mate is an alpha, isn't he?" Alpha Crestfield asked. I breathed in, slowly turning to look at her. She stood there in complete composure, her hand never left my back, her eyes sharp and calculating as she waited for my answer. She knew what it was, but she wanted to hear it from me, to see if I would try to lie to her. Gritting my teeth, I laughed bitterly. "Yes, an alpha," I said, thinking about their faces and the deep-rooted rage I felt overflowing. "But he's not my mate." Alpha Crestfield rose a brow, a small smirk pulling at her lips. Withdrawing her hand to her side, she lifted her head higher. She looked amused, happy even, her aged but beautiful face contorting in slyness. "I see," she mumbled lowly. "You want revenge, don't you?" My wolf perked at the tone in her voice, a suggesting, knowing one. Without hesitation, I nodded. Looking at Lyra one last time, I let my hand caress her cold cheek, my fragile heart chipping away the final layers of warmth left inside me. More than anything. Silence seeped into the room. A few seconds went by before I finally heard something. The men and nurse that had accompanied us started walking out the door, closing it behind them. Alpha Crestfield and I were the last ones in the room. She smiled, her eyes lighting up with interest. "Would you like a chance to fulfill it?" My eyes connected with hers. I knew she was deathly serious, but so was I. This woman, the Alpha of Greyhound, was giving me a chance. A chance I never got in Nightwake. A chance in getting vengeance on those who wronged me. A chance to rip into that rogue's chest and tear out his heart. A chance I wasn't stupid enough to let up. Yes, 4 years later. Alpha Selene, Miss Meredith Crestfield, is here to see you. I paused, my fist an inch away from hitting the punching bag. Ragged breaths left me as my chest heaved from the overexertion of my body. Wisps of pale blonde hair clung onto my skin from the sweat coating it. Dropping my posture, I put a hand to my hip and glanced over at the clock on the wall. 6:30 a.m. I've been working out for 3 hours already. Noah Jones, my beta, stood right outside my personal gym. He wore his usual black button-down with dark dress pants matching with black dress shoes. With a stack of papers tucked in his arms, he looked at me expectantly, his green eyes shifting to the busted punching bags on the floor before returning to me with amusement. His lips twitched. A small smile threatened to inch across his face, but he withheld himself. "Stressed?" he asked in the mind link. A mumble pulled from my lips while I ignored him. Pulling the wraps around my fists off, I stepped away from the punching bag and walked over to the bench where my bottled water was. No doubt about it, I was stressed. Piles and piles of admission requests were coming in all at once. Sure, I had Noah with me to help, but I was the one who had the actual say on who can join and who couldn't. The request rate had risen so high since our pack ranked second best. Rankings were announced annually, and the chancellor, along with his administration, were the ones to decide who placed where. Usually, it was population size and fundings that majorly factored into the ranking system, but manpower and international and local alliances were also components. Grabbing the bottle and twisting the cap open, I lifted it to my lips and downed the whole thing. Fresh, cool water, quenching my thirst from the overheating of my body, gave me a moment of relief. It's been 2 years since I've officially claimed the Alpha title from Meredith. I underwent intense training to even be considered worthy of the title. Once I proved myself by completing the courses, I changed my last name to Crestfield and took over as her adoptive daughter. Getting the documents to declare my severance from the Dixon family and the Nightwake Pack had been difficult. Not so much because I needed permission, as I was already an adult and therefore not reliant on my blood family's approval, but because it had to be kept under wraps. My identity was a secret we needed to keep. Normally, to withdraw from a pack, the wolf needed to gain permission from their current alpha. But with my special circumstance and Meredith's decision to adopt me as her daughter and heir, the chancellor had been lenient. Supposedly, there was a clause somewhere that should a member who was on forced temporary pack transfer get hurt or damaged in any way within the temporary pack they resided in, they'd have the right to leave their original pack without bringing it up to the Alpha for a formal parting. Forced pack transfers were usually for those who were known to be disruptive, or possibly one of those in the rare instances which 2 wolves were dating, and suddenly one found his or her mate, and they break up. Bitterness was always a lead cause for disruption. Accepting the Alpha title from Meredith had been exhilarating. The pride and power I felt from the ceremony had reinforced my determination to succeed. It wasn't by any means an easy transition. I had a handful of challengers trying to take the title from me because they initially saw me as an outsider, a threat, someone who was from an enemy pack. They hated the thought of someone outside the pack rising as the new Alpha. Ignoring that, I was personally handpicked by the current Alpha herself. But of course, I met those challenges. I met them all and pounded into everyone who came witness to the fight that I was not to be taken lightly. No mercy, no remorse, and absolutely no hesitation. Anyone who dared to take this from me wouldn't be let off easy. I wasn't going to let everything I worked so hard for go tumbling down because of it. Sighing as I crushed the plastic bottle in my hand, I threw it at the trash and nodded at him. Noah gave me a curt bow before stepping aside to make room. Meredith came strolling in, a smile on her face with a small black box in her hands. Standing gracefully tall with her hair slicked back and an elegant black knee-length dress on, she rose a brow at me. Hazel eyes sparkled with amusement as she took in my tired, sweaty appearance. "Training so hard this early in the morning?" I scoffed with a small smile. No place I'd rather be. Meredith hummed in response, looking around the gym before deciding to head toward the bench. She sat down, her knees pressed together with the box gently placed in the middle of her lap. Her eyes fell to me. She looked a little perplexed. Finally, she patted the space beside her. "Sit with me, Celine." And I did. I sat beside her, wiping the sweat from my neck with a towel I left on the bench. I tried to ignore how filthy I felt with my sweat making me sticky. My skin still burned from all the blood pumping into me. I was so tired. But it wasn't enough. Pain helped remind me of why I was doing this. Who I was doing this for. I couldn't afford to even waste a minute of my time. "You know you didn't have to get me the house." Meredith broke, looking pointedly at me. I could see in her eyes that she felt somewhat indebted. The house she was referring to was the one her mate built for her as a gift. Her mate, Kit, had died after being mauled on by rogues. Zeneron's current leader, father, was the leader at the time. He had ordered an attack on their pack years ago, but they fought tooth and nail against them. They managed to hold the rogues back before they could burn Greyhound to the ground. She was 19 when he passed and met him only a year prior. Losing a mate was something I couldn't begin to understand. I've seen how some would fare after losing their significant other. Some would go crazy, while some would manage to mourn, but move on with another in their lives. Meredith was neither. She decided against finding someone else, believing it to be betrayal on her part if she did. So she lived a lonely life as Alpha, never having the chance to love another and have kids. The house he was building was never finished and was under Kit's name. With no will or testament, it was passed down to his brother by default. His brother who sold the house to a family of humans that lived there ever since. Meredith long gave up trying to get the house, not wanting to get mixed up with humans. Only recently was it put up for sale, but the moment it did, I bought it. I had Noah keep track on it since Meredith told me the story. I knew, from the very moment I heard of it, I was going to get it for her. I rolled my eyes and tilted my head to the side with a small smile. "And you didn't have to help me 4 years ago?" My smile fell, my face turning serious. "But you did." Meredith went quiet. She tapped her fingers along the edges of the black box rhythmically. She relaxed her shoulders and stared at the wall, her wolf sadly peeking out as she thought about Kit. It was only in moments like this that she ever lets out her true emotions. As a single alpha who raised the pack from ashes by herself, she learned to conceal everything she felt inside her. She learned to assume the worst in people and refrained from ever showing even the smallest hint of weakness. "It isn't like I did it out of the pure goodness of my heart, Celine. I needed an heir. With no child of my own, Greyhound would have fallen apart. In truth, you were a godsend. A godsend with a tragic backstory, but a heart made out of gold. A godsend with alpha traits that's needed to run a pack. A godsend I used for my selfish needs to make sure this pack kept going. Not only that, but you're after rogues. The same rogues that killed my Kit. I trapped you, Celine. I didn't help you." I chuckled at her words. "Godsend," she says. It's funny how now, if people think of the alpha of the Greyhound pack, godsend wouldn't be in that list of colorful words they describe me with. Granted, they never really met me officially. All they knew were the stories floating around of how I savagely hunted down packs of rogues one by one. Sometimes even stories of defeating alphas that got a little too big-headed, thinking they could come here claiming my territory. Of course, that was 100% true. I was quite the isolate alpha, never going out to events unless absolutely needing to, which never happened yet. And you think what I'm doing is for the sake of purity and good? My want to destroy the rogues and eliminate each and every one of them through the most torturous ways possible? A quick, efficient death simply isn't enough. I want to watch them burn and beg for their lives. The only reason I have the power to do that now is because of you. You gave me the chance. A chance that has many consequences. Consequences that I knew of, but still took. She still didn't look convinced. With a reassuring smile, I put my hand on her back like she had done to me the first day I met her. My wolf perked up, rubbing her head against Meredith's wolf in attempt to console her. They grew a strong bond to one another, as I did with Meredith. It was my decision, Meredith, and I don't regret it one bit. I don't care if what you did was because of your selfishness, because honestly, I did the same. If you were using me, I was using you. You used me for my bloodline, I used you for the title. We both got what we wanted here, but I still got more of the bargain. The house is just a small token of thanks. Finally, Meredith smiled. She shook her head in amusement and breathed in. I may have been the one to rescue you that day, but you saved me. She whispered to herself. Taking my left hand in hers, she gave me a gentle squeeze before flipping the small box open. Inside was a ring, a green stone in the center with small carvings of flowers in the golden band. An engraved GH was on the inner band of the ring. It was beautifully elegant. This is the Greyhound crest, she explains, taking the ring off the slit. She slowly slid the ring on my middle finger. I found myself surprised to see that it fit perfectly. The green stone shined brightly under the light. It felt empowering to wear it. My wolf feeling overwhelmed, but at the same time pride was swelling in her chest. She truly felt like an alpha, now that she was wearing it. I would have given you this a while ago, but I didn't know whether or not you wanted to continue being alpha. She moved the ring around my finger, smiling brightly at the way it fit. I had it resized and everything. I would have put it on your ring finger, but... She peered up through her lashes to give me a sly smirk. I'm sure you'll find someone who's willing to slide one on for you in the future. I snorted reflexively at her insinuation. Meredith has been actively trying to convince me to find someone. She'd send a few profiles of eligible mateless alphas or betas who came from overseas every week. Once, she actually brought one to the pack house when I was down in the torture/interrogation room. Imagine the shock on the poor man's face when he saw me coming up from the basement, drenched in blood, with a butcher's apron around my neck. It's safe to say I've never seen a wolf run that fast in my life. She was set on the whole bringing my love life to life, or so she says. She knew of my history with mates and my family. She understands me, to say the least. Or, well, she tries to. The only thing she didn't understand was why I didn't want to get involved with someone else. Unlike her, my mate didn't want me. There'd be no betraying on my part if I chose to move on like he did with Hestia. It's not like I was saving myself for Landon. The man can die for all I care, but I wasn't keen on looking for romance just yet. I wasn't against the idea, but now was not the time. Besides, I doubt anyone would be interested in the Hellhound. Ah, yes. My favorite nickname of all. It was a play on the pack name, but also quite scary to the ears. I honestly don't know from which story that one stemmed from, but it caught on. Noah would mess around with it, accidentally calling me that when he told his mate Melia about his day right in front of me. I inwardly grimaced when I remembered the pups in the pack retelling the stories they heard from our warriors. The rogues were so scared. They saw the alpha and begged for mercy. The Hellhound is upon us. As amusing as it was to see pups under the age of 7 circling around pack territory, calling out Hellhound this, Hellhound that, it actually started getting old really quickly. Sucking in a breath, I gave Meredith an apologetic look. Meredith, you know I'm not interested in that sort of stuff right now. She held her hands up in mock surrender but failed to hide the smile on her face. All I'm saying is that you shouldn't be so closed off on the idea. If someone who catches your interest comes along, don't be so quick to shut the door. With these last words, she got up and set the box on the bench. Without taking another look in my direction, she made her way out of the gym. Thank you, I said suddenly, twisting the ring around my finger. Meredith stopped in her step to listen, but didn't turn around. She waited quietly for me to finish. For everything. Meredith turned over her shoulder, a warm smile gracing her face as she stared at me. I always felt such a deep connection to her since the moment I met her. I guess it was because she became somewhat like a mother figure to me. She was always there to push me when I needed the push, always there to console me when I had those attacks until I learned how to control it. She was there for everything. Like Bentley was. You're welcome. Oh, by the way, I passed by your gamma on my way here. He seemed a little on edge, mumbling about something. I suggest you go talk to him before the young lad rips his hair out.